A huge loader rests broken near the rubble. Another loader pushes a heavy rock aside. The massive stone is finally shifted away. A worker struggles to move the boulder. Mechanics prepare to loosen the undercarriage bolts. They detach heavy hydraulic lines from the machine. Working the wrench requires immense physical effort. They slowly untwist the stubbornly tight connectors. Another loader drives in to assist the repair. A worker climbs onto the broken machine. They inspect the engine compartment for access. Mechanics resume unscrewing bolts from below. Thick black oil starts dripping from the axle. They carefully loosen the heavy axle housing. Every rusty bolt demands serious elbow grease. The mechanics meticulously detach the remaining fasteners. The massive axle is finally freed from underneath. The chain is rigged to hoist the part. The workers clear debris around the work area. The dirty axle assembly lies on the ground. A loader drags the heavy part outside. The mechanics inspect the extremely dirty component. They start unbolting the heavy outer housing. Years of grime make the task difficult. They methodically remove each tight perimeter bolt. The rusted bolts are tough to break free. They slowly pull the inner shaft out. A heavy metal plate is carefully removed. They prepare to pry the main housing open. The heavy bolts are finally coming loose. The mechanics work together to disassemble it. They use a wrench on the stubborn screws. The casing is separated, exposing the gears. A young boy helps hand over tools. They clean the separated parts for inspection. A worker uses a screwdriver to pry pieces. The inner differential gear cluster is revealed. A heavy hammer is used to break seals. They aggressively chisel away the grime. The stubborn housing cap refuses to budge easily. They keep hammering to free the stuck cover. A large screwdriver is driven into the gap. The heavy end cap is finally detached. They use a large wrench on the differential. The mechanics untwist the large retaining bolts. Every bolt requires significant leverage to turn. They steadily disassemble the heavy differential carrier. The inner components are pulled out completely. They flip the heavy differential for better access. The planetary gear assembly is carefully inspected. Meticulously take apart the small internal gears. A worker hands over a clean, heavy component. They tap the gear cluster to loosen it. The heavy hammer frees the stuck internal gears. They struggle to separate the intricate pieces. The tight gears are slowly pried apart. They continue dismantling the complex gear system. The intricate inner workings are fully exposed. They gently hammer the housing to separate it. The massive bearing assembly is taken out. They carefully remove the central ring gear. The heavy parts are laid out for cleaning. They struggle to lift the massive gear housing. It takes 2 men to position the part. They finally separate the 2 heavy casing halves. The inner ring gear is lifted out safely. The large ring gear is set aside carefully. They prepare to clean and rebuild the axle. A worker hammers a fresh component into place. They begin inserting bolts into the new assembly. Each bolt is hand-tightened before wrenching. They carefully tighten the perimeter bolts down. The rebuilt differential is ready for the housing. They apply fresh sealant around the casing edge. The inner bearing is seated perfectly in place. They carefully mate the 2 heavy casing halves. The heavy cover is finally lowered into position. They bolt the massive housing back together tightly. The bolts are firmly secured with a wrench. They ensure every single bolt is torqued correctly. The long axle shaft is prepared for installation. Mechanic cleans the mating surface thoroughly. The outer hubcap is pressed onto the axle. They start bolting the heavy end cap down. High-pressure water is used to clean the casing. The grime washes away, revealing clean metal. The rebuilt axle halves are prepared for joining. They carefully position the heavy sun gear. A heavy friction plate is added to the assembly. They carefully install the heavy outer ring gear. The 2 massive axle halves are pushed together. They ensure the splines align perfectly during mating. The bolts are inserted to secure the junction. A worker washes the other casing with water. The clean carrier is carefully lifted into place. They meticulously align the heavy gear assembly. The planetary gear carrier is seated perfectly. They verify the rotation of the inner gears. The heavy outer plate is lowered into position. Sealant is applied to the outer housing edge. The final large ring gear is carefully installed. They prepare to bolt the final casing shut. The massive axle is finally fully assembled. They ensure all components are firmly locked together. The rebuilt axle is checked for smooth rotation. A loader is brought in to move it. The heavy axle is dragged back into position. It is carefully maneuvered under the broken machine. Mechanics reconnect the hydraulic lines to the housing. They tighten the outer bolts of the casing. The massive part is lifted for final alignment. They insert the main retaining pin securely. A worker tightens the central bolt carefully. They torque the bolts with a long wrench. The loader approaches the axle in the dark. The heavy part is positioned under the machine. They carefully align the axle with the chassis. Mechanics work late into the night. A worker climbs onto the loader's engine bay. They use the loader's bucket for lifting leverage. Sparks fly as they weld part of the mount. The welding secures the heavy brackets in place. They adjust the axle's final position carefully. Chains are used to hoist the heavy component. They struggle to align the massive mounting holes. The heavy bolts are finally pushed through. They start tightening the main structural bolts. The heavy housing is firmly secured to the frame. They ensure the axle is perfectly straight. The mechanics tighten the undercarriage bolts securely. A wrench is used to lock the mounts. They tighten the final retaining bolts underneath. The loader's bucket is lowered down carefully. The heavy machine is finally back on its wheels. They finish the last bits of tightening underneath. A worker uses a long wrench for leverage. The giant tire is rolled back into place. They carefully align the massive wheel hub. The final lug nuts are tightened securely.